Music. It is interesting that the word used in French by musicians to describe their written texts, their scores, is the word partition. It is interesting that we have had a rigorous definition of this word since mathematicians chose it. This is not the first encounter between these two groups, these two functions and their language. Without always knowing it, they are always together. They were born under the same sign at the same moment. They are twins, companions weathering the same storms. Only they know what an agreement is, what fine-tuning is, and how to accomplish it. To play together, there must be an agreement, tuning up, and there must be an agreement to calculate or deduce together. They divide a set or collection or any sort of object in parts or subsets separated 2 by 2. None of these parts encroaches on another, and their intersection is empty. No note of the violin can be played on the flute, and so forth. Just as it is for the coat of arms with its separated spaces. What I mean is that the text is adapted to the instrument. No one is permitted to play on the oboe what the cellist has to read. Everything is paradoxical here, to play together as well as possible. The disjunction must be perfect and strict. There is no common text for anyone, only the conductor has the whole score in front of him. How and why did Rousseau choose to copy music at so much the page as his job? How and why did this practice fascinate him, to the point of his giving it the longest hours of his life? To the point of counting, at his leisure, and for the sheer pleasure, the thousands of pages he had covered with notes. Why and how did he follow the notes this way, almost blindly? I think that Jean-Jacques lived the parasitic relation without seeing it in all its evidence in front of him. The necessity of reviewing his life by confessing it came from having to look for what was missing in the theoretical writings, what the theory was hiding and not showing clearly. Rousseau progressively constructs, as this book tries to do, the field of human or social sciences, not the sciences themselves, but their field and its conditions. It is clear enough that it is necessary to begin with the theory of relations, that in this beginning, hesitation between a local or global theory is unavoidable, and that this hesitation is integrated into this problem. In a small, close group, the garden of Julie, a refined ménage à trois castrates the new Abelard. In an even rarer group, attentive raising leaves a green orphan. On the other hand, the social contract speaks of the general will and traces the face of the legislator. Local, global. The dialogues show the blind view of the difference, écart, by exacerbating it. I am alone, and there are all of them. The local is minimized to the point of solitude, and the global is maximized toward the quantified universal. I see at last, in the shadows, the aforementioned general will, and the thing is atrocious. Perhaps the legislator is some dangerous madman or some sacrificed innocent person. But at the same time, the confessions obscurely look in the vicinity of the solitary monad to see where the relation is going, where it is fixed, and how it is constituted. The relation tends toward zero. It is going to vanish in the isles, in the middle of lakes. Jean-Jacques dies, and his last sentence attempts to give to woman the aid he received. His last word confesses that he never returned any aid. Truth from his last drop of ink. Perhaps he dies without knowing that he finally discovered what he was looking for. The simple chain, me, my brother, my neighbor, my friend, and my society, demands a linkage, and there is none. No, there is one. It is the simple arrow, the logical atom, the atom of relation, lived, obscure, in his life at the hostess's house. But as for me, separated from them and from everything, who am I myself? the one who always received, and who, in articula mortis, suddenly remembers that he had resolved to give back. The parasite. Detached, yes. I am nothing but a poor madman in the shadows. But my first attachment is derivation, scion and stock, grafting, installation in a small house with my family. Small. He abandons his children. I don't care about the moral aspect of this affair. What do fault, punishment, guilt, oaths, and true or false reparations matter to me? These viscous adherences are repugnant. Why and with what should I defend Rousseau? Why should I attack him? Are ethics and combat always necessary to create a theatre and impassion the spectators? All that is tiring. What does it matter to me if he was good or bad? What does the handful of ashes in an urn in the Pantheon matter? Let's leave this circus, leaving ethics behind. What counts is, almost, the herb garden. I mean the vital symptom, like the sign of the species. Biology, natural history. A parasite never nourishes its children. Otherwise it would be in the position of the host. A parasite defends itself from being parasited. The thing is there in all its simplicity. I cost my mother her life. She was my hostess. Symmetrically, I abandon my children. I am not a possible host. No one can replace me. Welfare is a possible hotel. Look at this animal lay its eggs in a suitable store or an eventual vector. The descendants will develop there, fed and sheltered, and they will die there, like their grandmother. What would have happened if Rousseau's children had been abandoned to the general will instead of to public welfare? Perhaps I might have liked to say, epiphyte, this herb garden pushing me too. I don't know what holds me back. Undoubtedly, movement. The promenade. Islands of coherence appear that had not been perceived. Theory is less in its designated spots than it is in the obscurity of the confessional texts. Philosophy looks for it there. We must follow its path. It causes the old cultural tradition to emerge again, the one that associates the life of some plants and animals to our abuse values. The hotels found, attachments, the instinctive abandon of children, even botany, sickness. These scattered elements work together, not so much in kind as around a function, or better yet, a relation. The garden of Julie abounds in parasitic plants. It is the herb garden of paradise. It is easy to run to aid the victory, to see that what is missing from this tradition is in fact this laborious gesture that Rousseau, for hours and days on end, never stopped doing. Why was he so set on earning his living by copying notes? Answer, because of noise. Answer, he was completing the field of the parasite. He could have lived from his work. I'll stop for a moment. What is a work? It eats its worker, devouring his flesh and his time. It is slowly substituted for his body. The invasion causes fear. Who am I? This, there, written in black on white, fragile, and this is my body, has taken the place of my body, frail. This is written in my blood. I am bleeding from it, and it will stop only with the last drop. The work parasites the worker. No. Soon he no longer exists. He dies of it, and he can do nothing about it. He lives from it. I eat my work, and from it, I drink this streaming production daily. I sleep under the tent of its tabernacle in the expanse of its space. I exist in the shade of its volume's fruits. Who am I? This body, united in its crucible, I would be nothing without this. The work parasites me, and I parasite it. Soon, perhaps, we will be wise fellows together at a dinner. Soon, let us hope, we will be adapted to each other at a joyous banquet, both light and perpetual, where we will share ambrosia. Yes, I know, my life is becoming symbiotic. Close parenthesis. It was not entirely a noise. He copies clusters of notes when he could be living off his work, being nourished by it. No, he cannot live, like you and me, only from what sustains, for we know on what he has made his life depend. On truth. To live on truth, that's all. But he did not say what is true in the field of economics, in the field of politics, nor in that of education, in the general, contractual conditions of life in society. It is not that he lied, but he proposed things only by abstractions. He comes back, then, to experience. He meditates, he confesses. The compact meaning then emerges, the relational truth so long sought for. I have lived at the table of others. Who am I then? Who am I, assuredly? Here I am alone, without relation. Reduced to myself, I nourish myself from my own matter, for it does not give out. I am sufficient to myself, though I ruminate empty. My dried-up imagination and my extinguished ideas no longer furnish food for my soul. Who am I, then? Strictly speaking, a partition. I am not an element of a social set, a family, a group, humanity, for all of them have untied my belonging or inclusion. I have lost all relation. I live in the disjointed. Around me, intersections remain empty, calm waters, agitated, around the isle. Who am I? A partition. This meditation, Cartesian in nature, rediscovers Leibniz's solutions. They are in music as if buried. Harmony conceals the collection of partitions, scores, with no relation. Might as well sit from morning until night in their deafening presence. I write. I've kept watch since dawn, waiting, and in order to wait, for a fire that will spurt forth one day, the writing of fire, atop the wall, above the banquet that was suddenly interrupted, where the tongues of fire fly over the stiffened necks, finally opening ears. He keeps watch to music from the early morning. He waits for the answer hidden in the jumble of notes and keys, the simple answer to the questions in their black traces. I am the partition. Here is the partition. What is harmony? What is music? How is this composition established? He is in the shadows, and we are there with him. We see clearly for having seen that night. The collective is a black box. What can one see of relations, and who sees them? Men parasite men. Man is a host to man, and that is still a black theorem. The relation parasites the relation. The relation itself is a parasite. This logic is obscure and is overturned, for it is fuzzy. I mustn't look any longer in the transparent epiphany of a poor theory for what remains black in the thickness of the barely observable. The general will was an abstraction, but general animosity is concrete, lived, and suffered. On the road of conditions, we can no longer stop the request. How did they agree? I don't know. How to agree, not for or against this one or that one, that is henceforth no longer the question, but how to agree here and now in any way possible. During the banality of life, life as it is to be confessed. Interceptions come and go. Invitations here and there, at the marquises, the vicars, the lions, the masters, and the rats. Astute branchings, furtive thefts, small noises. The pen. Suddenly, but seriously, the pen falls from my hands. Small noises and interruptions increase until a crisis or a catastrophe is reached. The ceiling falls on the table. The floodwaters fill the valley. Crackings, noise, chaos. Outside the room, Simonides. Outside the shipwreck, the old aberrescent hosts. They hear the noise. They are the friends of the gods. Or inversely, the catastrophe is Pentecost. The third is alone outside. He brings the wind and the sound. Jean-Jacques is alone outside. He sees the shadows. He hears the chaos. Victory is in the hands of the parasitic noises. I am speaking plurivocally of Rousseau, his work and life, the road he travelled, his conclusion. Of all that precedes, the banquets of this book, of the Acts of the Apostles and of Greco-Roman tales, of Fellini's Prova d'Orchestra, the rehearsal, with my text amidst the orchestra in words and images. We must begin again, in the room filled with rubble, in an uneasy obscurity, among the dead and the living, at the risk of noises that will soon come back. Parasites multiply until they reach the level of thunder and fury. The relation of abuse never ceases to rise. The simple arrow goes on. It has no brakes. Until a threshold where noise, abuse, or the arrow are no longer tolerated. Simonides is faced with the dead. Philemon with the flood. Rousseau with the night. The third man outside the closed room. What can be done? What makes us disagree? What interrupts us? The one who eats our bread and prohibits our messages. The parasite. The guest becomes master, and he produces a terrible noise. I am that guest. We must begin with him, with noise, with me. Who am I? The parasite. I am outside, alone, on the middle of the aisle and during the night. Listen. Open your ears. The words give you the solutions. Follow the words. The parasite disaccords, makes noise. I am a partition. I am alone, isolated, solitary, disjointed. Alone without any relation, or armed with a relation that mixes up messages. Henceforth, I am exceptionally qualified for the study I set for myself. I am an exception to the we, making this we impossible. But this exception is universal. What is it then that puts us in accord? The agreement, the tuning up itself. No theory, I beg you. The note. Follow the note. Music saves us, and the notes save us. The notes calm us, and music calms us. Grab onto the notes, follow them alone. The accord. The accord. On what object? About what? Later, later. But at least on a meaning. Later, I tell you. On the sound, then, first of all. If you do not make too much noise, I shall try to stop my own. If I sound correctly enough, you will evolve toward that peaceful justice. Before exchanging a single word, before agreeing on the code, we must at least emit a sound together. Here, one can send and receive at the same time. Yes, my signal is the only one in the world, and my voice cries out in the wilderness, in the stony desert of my whinings. Specific, individual pebbles. Let us remove these parasitic stones. By filing down the thorny edges of the sound, we approach each other. Being in tune musically and sonorously, the accord is the archaic accord of nuptial agreements. Accordai. Together. A vibration in several voices. Coming together, jouissance. The collective, at the least, is sonorous utopia. Hermes requires translations. Pentecost sings, resounds, and blows. The tongues melt in this fire. Music has spoken in tongues. It is free of parasites. The universal language of a buried contract. Just as a hungry guest is fascinated by the buffet of a feast, Jean-Jacques keeps to music. There lies, manifest and under wraps, the solution. The solution includes and excludes him. It includes him as a partition, and it excludes him as a parasite. Who am I? The condition of music, of the accord, and its obstacle. He copies it, writes it, keeps it, watches it, gives it. He exchanges it and sells it. He has always known how to resolve his question, not by what he says, but by what he does, which is clearer than the light of concepts and easier to understand than the double talk, langue de bois, of philosophy. And by what he does when he says. If a pen ever left a rustling noise on the blank silence of its field, if ever someone heard it, to describe in kind celestial voices or the noises of hell, it was the keeper of this music. Free of parasites, free of itself, absolutely purged of ego. The more I write, the less I am myself. Finally free of this noise. Each line moves away, runs away from the chance advance of chaos, of volcanic lava, of the cracked earth of an earthquake. It flies above hurricanes, it pacifies roaring beasts, the jaguar or the hungry wolf. It brings back the beloved from hell. It advances courageously in the vicinity of noise, facing it. An accord resounds, not a simple one, not foolish, naive, repeated or beaten in tempo, but at every step completely new, nourished for a long time on disorder and on the unexpected, and placed gently at the limits, on the fringe, the margin where the pure crystal of fountains flows between you and me. Let us dance while waiting for the animals to quench their thirst. Language accords us beneath the meaning, and the meaning often disperses us. Write, like him, on the distribution of a card game, on the black, shadowy back of chance. Write on the outside that you will show to others while hiding your hand, your partition. Don't stop writing on the wrong side of chance, disorder, noise, on the wrong side of your own circumstances, and, even in their flesh, a small music harmony for the other and with him.